Okay, great. I think we're going to start now. Hello, everyone. Good morning. Welcome to DigiPay 2020, the Future of Digital Payment Summit. And I hope all the attendees are having a good time attending the previous session. Well, moving on to the next session, which is going to be the panel discussion, the big payment debate, and bringing some top payments and business leaders on the way ahead of digital payment in the region and asking them to share their views on various aspects from infrastructure scalability to cybersecurity issues and many others. Well, our moderator for today is going to be Mr. Khalil Alami. Mr. Khalil Alami is the CEO of the leading online payment gateway Telr. Khalil has more than 2 decades of experience in the financial service sector, including 18 years in the payment and card industry, with a focus on payment infrastructure and system implementation. So welcome, Mr. Khalil. It's an absolute honor to have all of you all on board. I would please request all of you all to please, you can start the panel discussion. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Varsha, and thank you, Khalish Time, for this great DigiPay 2020. Given the circumstances and times, we are very excited to discuss, this big payment debate. I am honored to be moderating today's session with great industry leaders, pioneers of our payment industry, distinguished ladies and gentlemen. I am joined today by Ms. Ambareen Musa, the Chief Executive Officer of Souq Al Mal, as well as Dr. Tamer Eltoni, who is the Chief Commercial Officer of the Digital Finance Services of Etisalat, along with Kartik Taneja, the Executive Vice President and Head of Payments of Mashreq Bank, and last but not least, Mr. Ramana Kumar, the SVP and Head of Payments and Digital Banking for First Abu Dhabi Bank, FAB. Welcome, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you for joining us today. I would like to give you the opportunity to do a quick intro, but we'll give it with a 2 cents of after you give your intro, just give us what do you see from your perspective as leading professionals in this industry? What new trends are you seeing in the digital payment space, especially in the UAE, obviously? And how do you see them impacting the new startups, the SMEs that are up and coming? And if these trends have had any impact on your organization from a sales perspective, digitization, or operation perspective. So I will start, I guess, with Ms. Ambareen Musa. If you can please give us a quick introduction and please proceed. Thank you.
Thank you, Khalil, and thank you, Khalish Time, for organizing the DigiPay 2020. And I think, as Khalil just mentioned, circumstances are not ideal, but we try our best. So Ambareen Musa, I am the founder and CEO of Souq Al Mal. Souq Al Mal is a financial services aggregator, started in 2012. We're now in the UAE, in Bahrain, and in Saudi Arabia. In 2016, we actually moved into insurance, which means we added a comparison vertical to the site, which means now we compare the different insurance providers and allow customers to actually purchase online. Listen, I think when it comes to digital payment terms, I think things have completely gone off track or on track, whichever you want to take it, in the last 6-7 months. I remember when I used to pitch for investment into Souq Al Mal, we used to say, give it another 6-7 years, 5 to 7 years, and you'll see how the consumer behavior will start moving and shifting towards Europe and the Western and developed world. I can tell you, I think in the last 3-4 months, we've catalyzed the next 5 years of digital payments and how consumers view the ability or even have the courage to actually use digital payments instead. So I think for me, the trends have completely changed. If you asked me 6 months ago what it was and what it is now, it's completely changed. I think the industry and the consumer behavior has catalyzed and moved forward 5-10x from what we were to be. So the trends are being formed, I think, as we speak, and the rest is yet to see.
Great, thank you for this intro, Ambareen. Kartik, please introduce yourself and give us your 2 cents.
Sure. So, I want to start with just one opening comment that, the quote of 2020 is really you're on mute, right? So I was very careful to make sure I'm not on mute before I started. So I'm Kartik. I lead the payments business at Mashreq. Before this, I've had, over 20 years of experience in the Far East leading, cards and payments across 23 markets in my last role. It's probably the most exciting space. And what we are seeing right now is a sort of Cambrian explosion where, in the past, where, millions of species came into being at that era. And we are seeing a similar kind of explosion in terms of payment methods. And if we were to follow the usual trend of what this means for merchants, what this means for customers, it means there's going to be a lot more choice, perhaps a little bit more confusion. But eventually, I think where we should end up is a place where there's interoperability, where things like Pay ID, which is already being led by Ripple and supported by many people. I think standards and interoperability is what eventually we should end up with, and that's going to be good for the market. It's going to be good for consumers. It's going to be great for merchants as well.
Thank you so much for this great insight. I would like to move over to Mr. Ramana Kumar from FAB. If you can give us, please, a brief intro and also your opinion.
Sure. Thanks, Khalil. Good morning, everyone. It's my pleasure, and thank you, Khalil Times. The other quote, Kartik, is "Can you hear me?" That's a quote of 2020. Hi, can you hear me? So going back to having been in payments industry, and it's so relevant. Can you hear me? It resonates to me, saying, when people were doing SWIFT payments, or people were focused on bringing in more cash deposit machines and check deposit machines. I was in many panels, and I used to tell them, can you hear me? It's going to change, and it's going to drastically change. I'm Ramana Kumar. I head the payments for First Abu Dhabi Bank. I manage the acquiring business, the prepaid issuing business, the corporate card issuing business, government solutions, and we have launched our wallet about 2 years ago, Paid. And I sit on the board of Emirates Digital Wallet. I'm vice chairman of Emirates Digital Wallet. So it's pretty exciting times, as Kartik mentioned. The world is going through a super times. There is one side fintechs who just have an idea and want to mint money, just taking that idea into investor base. And on the other side, there are banks who have the same idea but can't implement because their systems are so traditionally built, and they don't want to go anywhere, or they can't go anywhere. So it's pretty interesting. Somewhere we all need to come together, and digital payment space is going to take a massive, as I call the tectonic shift, and it's happening.
Great. Yep. Thank you, Ramana. Thank you very much. So we've heard from Ms. Ambareen from the marketplace, leading marketplace in the market. We've heard from two bankers, and now I'm very interested to hear from Dr. Tamer, who wears double hats, comes from the telco from a different perspective, maybe. So please, Dr. Tamer, if you can introduce yourselves and give us your opinion.
Thank you, everyone. Indeed, the world is changing, and it's exciting to see that from a telco perspective, I'm speaking into a fintech sort of forum. I'm wearing the two hats in terms of I'm the head for digital services and devices in Etisalat. And at the same time, I'm the chief commercial officer for eWallet, which is a fintech company. What we have seen is that really things are changing, especially the customer behavior. So if we look at the customer behavior in terms of adoption of technology, in terms of purchasing online, in terms of their preference to use wallets, so we have seen a great jump. The latest statistics say that 70% of the customers would prefer to use wallets over cash. So things are really changing. And at the same time, we are seeing clearly that the regulation is picking up. It's introducing more and more flexibility. It's helping more non-financial companies to come into the picture and to play a role into the overall ecosystem. At the same time, from the technology side, things are really evolving significantly. We are seeing big data taking a big shape in terms of how you offer customers by segmenting them and giving them what really is relevant, whether it's on financial services or anything else, plus the infrastructure of the network. So it was impossible earlier to have such forums without really the high-speed connectivity, without having the infrastructure that really makes sense. It used to cost a fortune to have a conferencing facility in order to be able to communicate. And accordingly, these technologies, speaking of 5G or the earlier technology 4G, gives the ability and the facility for the businesses to get more connected and to be closer to the customers as much as possible. So very excited to contribute in this forum, in this panel, and that's it from myself.
Thank you, Doctor. Thank you, everyone, for this great insight. I'd like to shift over to Ambareen. Ambareen, today, we've talked about COVID. I'd like to keep this conversational, and we don't want to overkill the COVID situation. With this COVID and all these regulator stimuluses for our industry, making sure to go cashless, use contactless payments, and all this push towards no contact payments and digital payments and online payments, why are we still seeing cash on delivery as a major payment option, even in these times?
Listen, it's a fantastic question. And I can tell you at Souq Al-Mal, 90% of our customer base, the two aspects of it, right? There is an aspect of trust, meaning I am happy to pay online, but I do need to speak to someone first. I need to make sure you're real. I need to make sure your product exists. I need to make sure there's a refund policy. And that's what we see at Souq Al-Mal. Around 90% of our customer base, actually, they come online, they look for a quote, or they look at the credit card, they compare their different credit cards, but eventually, when it comes to financial services, I think it also depends on the industry, but when it comes to financial services, they do want to speak to someone, and that trust in the finance sector is still extremely poor. I think there's a lot more to do in terms of building that trust in financial institutions. Having said that, the ones they've spoken to someone from Souq Al-Mal and understood what products and all the ifs and the what I should know and what I shouldn't know about, 100% of them eventually pay online, right? Which is kind of unheard of. Having said that, if you move to industry now and you move to a typical e-commerce, people love to see the product before they actually pay online. So there is, I think Amazon and Noon potentially have actually managed to build a very interesting trust, a very, very strong trust. I mean, if you look at 6 years ago, Souq.com was doing a 90-10 cash on delivery and 10 online. Now it's shifted to 40-60, right? But there is still 40% of people on cash on delivery. And I think that these are the customers who are still kind of in that era of I trust Amazon, but I don't trust the product that's going to turn up in front of my door. And I want to make sure I get it on time, and I want to make sure I check it and then actually eventually through. And I think, look, it's a culture thing. Remember, I think the one thing I find very intriguing is consumer psychology. When people are forced into a certain behavior because there is no other option, they will do it. So if I tell you every e-commerce company decides tomorrow to stop cash on delivery, they will suffer for the next 6 months. But eventually, people will catch up on it, and they will actually you will eventually probably get 100% digital payment. But who is ready and prepared to take that 6 months of low volume to actually for a better future? So taking a step back to jump higher story. But I think if you force customers, there's no other way, and they'll start missing the online purchase and the ability to compare online and the ability to just have something delivered to the house, they will adopt it. And you've seen it in COVID. It was amazing. I mean, our sales have gone up by 30% day on day. People who never ever thought about even buying their insurance online was forced to, and they did. And we did a quick survey with all our customer base, and what we found was on the financial services industry, out of everybody we surveyed, 65% of those customers said it was the first time they were forced to try the online channel. And by the way, they will continue. Actually, this was just a trigger and a catalyst. Yeah.
That's a fantastic answer. Thank you so much. I would like to take that, that answer and look at it from a perspective, from a banking perspective. Maybe Ramana, I would let you please give us that perspective. But before you do so, we have been joined also by Mr. Frederic de Melker, who runs and heads the personal banking at TrackBank. Thank you for joining us, Frederic. I will give you a chance to introduce yourself in a few minutes. Just let's wrap up this question and we'll come back to you. Right. Mr. Ramana, can you please give us your insights from a banking perspective on the COD question?
Yeah. To be honest, COD is a very traditional mindset. There are 2 points of view. Ambareen covered awesome perspective from a consumer point of view and a startup or a technology e-commerce based companies, etc. But the same applies for a traditional companies, and I won't call it COD, but let's look at it from a product of bakalas delivering to households or small department stores or anyone who used to step back always to say, I don't want to put in an electronic payment model because it's costly for me. You charge me whatever, 1.5%, 2%, why should I bear that cost, right? And those companies don't realize that the cost of holding cash, there's a study done, and I come from a corporate side of it in terms of cash management, and we did a study. The cost of holding cash is 15 to 16%. But most of these merchants don't understand that the cost of holding cash is pretty high. There is fraud, there is, there are hundreds of, additional costs you put in accountants and, reconciliation and so on and so forth. Now, from a cash on delivery perspective, of course, the trust and am I ordering the same product I'm going to get? I think the companies have done awesome, companies like Sukalmal or others, actually saying you can refund it if you don't like it. And, we'll not charge you anything. And, kudos to these companies who have really started putting in these initiatives and started building trust. And I think it's picking up. So if we handle the e-commerce side of it and move it, and I'm someone who is fully supportive if the fintechs or e-commerce companies come to us and say, let's make it zero COD. We would love to do that. And from banking perspective, we're fully supportive of it.
Fantastic. Thank you so much. And yeah, I agree with you both. You touched on a very important point where we looked at Souq.com, having 90-10, 90% COD. And then when Amazon came in and they have a higher online payment method, it might be because of the trust of their refund policy. So if you don't get what you are promised, it's 100% refund immediately, no questions asked. So Absolutely. Maybe that builds this trust. Fantastic. Thank you so much. Frederic, I'd like you, if you would please introduce yourself just quickly and give us just a brief point of view from your point of view as a banker on what do you believe is the new trends in the digital payments space, briefly.
Yeah, hi everybody. A little bit later because of technical issues, but here I am. I'm Fred de Melker, and I run the personal banking, which is retail banking for RagBank. And like any other bank, we are on a big journey of transforming the old school of banking into the new digital application. I think the main trend is, from a banking perspective, is very clear, where banks in the past were having almost a monopoly on payment, and a customer had to be part of a banking ecosystem to pay, and even in a digital way, if we go 10 years back, for instance. Now, slowly, the trend is that we're moving into customer ecosystems. And the customer is not really thinking about, oh, I'm going to pay this invoice by that channel, or I'm going to pay through a bank or through a fintech. They simply look, my phone is going to pay it for me. And the different channels are simply in front of the customer, simply pushing the different apps and try to do their payment. And it's not only from the payment side, it's also from services side and even from product side. I think we're going to a future where a bank is not going, or any financial institution, being bank or fintech, is coming up with one product. A customer will start constructing its own hyper-personalized products by taking elements from different actors in the market. And I think if we talk about strategy, this is the long-term view that I'm having. From a strategy point of view, it is not like, oh yes, let's do this as well. Let's start a payment company and do something. Now it starts with a customer will have a certain problem. how can we solve that? And of course, their fintechs are very agile and dynamic. And for a bank, yeah, today it's the big challenge to find your way into that new space.
Fantastic. Thank you so much. And it's good that you touched upon that ties me into my next question about touching on the smartphones. We know Emirates Digital Wallet is a new wallet that was recently launched among, many other similar e-wallets in the market. While this e-wallet trend comes to the UAE, recently, it comes in late. Some other markets are more advanced in e-wallets. And I wanted to ask Mr. Kartik from Mashreq, what is your view on the driving force of such a launch, and how will this influence the digital buying behaviors or the consumer behaviors of the UAE?
That's a really interesting question, because a lot of people are not sure today whether wallets will actually succeed. But if you look at the archetypes of successful wallets worldwide, right, there's a few, right? You have the Alipays and the Paytm type wallets in India, which is pure, CASA, pretty much CASA linked, and targets the sort of lower end of the market. And these two markets, China and India, have an amazing amount of population which had bank accounts and didn't have a payment method, and therefore there was a market ready for that product when it happened. I'm not so sure that more developed markets will follow that archetype. So if you look at the others, I would say that one of the successful methods is a coalition based one, and Emirates Digital Wallet is the archetype. It follows that archetype, saying that if every bank, and I know that not every bank is on this platform today, we have about 15 or 16 banks which have committed to it. But the idea is that if it becomes as close to ubiquitous as possible in a market, then people will find it easy to use. And one of the biggest use cases, which is P2P for wallets, right? When you're going and, the classical, the sharing the pizza lunch example, right? It's really easy to do that because you don't have to think too hard whether the other person has that wallet as well or not. So I'm actually quite bullish on Emirates Digital Wallet. I think it's going to succeed. Not that it won't require work, because ultimately it's the network effect.
Thank you so much, Kartik. Dr. Tamer, you wear two hats, one as a telco and the other one as a CCO of the Etisalat e-wallet. Can you tell us how is the Etisalat e-wallet different than the Emirates Digital Wallet, and what kind of initiatives Etisalat Digital is launching in this very dynamic market?
Well, what we're seeing, of course, financial inclusion is a must, and the presence of non-banking solutions and on the fintech space is very important in order to bring closer the customers who are unbanked. So UAE is blessed with a very strong infrastructure, but when it comes to cash, still 60% of the transactions are cash transactions, and 56% of the customers are either underbanked or unbanked. So the irony here, there are some segments who can get a loan of a couple of millions at their doorsteps, where some of the other segments still they are not having any type of digital payments. And in order to flourish e-commerce or small businesses, it's very important to do this type of transformation where we get the technology closer to each and everyone. Saying so also, if you look at the smartphone penetration, it's above 80% in terms of penetration in the UAE, and it's one of the highest worldwide, which creates a very rich environment and the success elements for a stored value account, a prepaid wallet, where all the customers can use it across different channels. Building the ecosystem around this, which is from the agent network or from the merchant network, is a key in order to ensure that there is always a reason to use for whoever is carrying on it. It's not only about transferring money, it's about paying your utilities, it's about paying at merchants, it's about paying online, remitting money outside your wallet to your home back there, where UAE is one of the top remittance countries, so it's around 168 billion dirham per year. So it's a massive opportunity, and I think there is space for everyone in that opportunity.
Thank you, Dr. Tamer. You know, speaking of these new trends and initiatives that we are seeing, you know, we've seen fintechs help in the growth of this payment industry. You know, while I'm known for being a hardliner on fintechs versus banks, but today I believe the question is not banks versus fintechs. I think the question is, you know, who will win? And the answer is, it's not the banks, it's not the fintechs. The winner is going to be the consumer. And the answer to reach that, I believe the collaboration is quite important. So and at the same time, we've seen many banks try to enter into the fintech space. And I believe we have a great example today where we've seen RAKBank recently launched a fintech-like service called Skiply, focused simply on collecting the school fees, especially during the COVID situation, as a new payment platform. So I would like to ask Frederic if you can please shed some light on how you see the banks helping the growth of the fintech space by collaborating with the fintechs.
Yeah, sure. Yeah, for me, there are two main elements in this digital revolution, right? It is relevance and reach. These are the only two main players, and that when I refer to what you were saying, make the consumer win, always win, right?
Yes.
Now, if we look at reach, that's where exactly today most of the fintechs are struggling with, right? They can come up with fantastic solutions for big problems, but they're not finding their way to go to that consumer. While for banks, it is the other way around. The reach we have somewhere, we have a customer base, people are used to us, but there for us as banks, it's the relevance that is at stake, right? So why would I use a bank for a service that we talked about it earlier about I have to pay extra, a big fee for or whatever, while there are other alternatives. So if you are capable of marrying both and bringing that fintech and bank together in experience and knowledge, I mean, then you hit the road for the future, right? And yeah, you bring up a Skiply as an example. Yeah, well, during the COVID times, of course, there was an accelerator to make it very successful, because it was not only like, okay, I would like to pay digitally, it became like, I have to pay digitally, right? So there it certainly helped. Now, the funny thing is, and we were talking about earlier about cash on delivery, and it's very difficult to change the mindset of some consumers. What we saw with Skiply was the other way around. We had to convince schools that digital payment was a very good solution for them, because they were so focused on cash handling, cash delivery, and cash management, that they didn't see that a digital solution would help them. They were more looking at, oh, but that digital solution from my acquiring side will cost me 70 bips, will cost me 1%. Not seeing that the cost of the cash handling was even more than what they should have paid for digital. So bringing all these ingredients together within Skiply, we convinced the school like, okay, here you can clearly see that there is something in for you. And at the other hand, to the consumer, like, okay, you don't need to stand in a row in the queue anymore with 10 handwritten checks. A little bit of COVID extra really pushed that into the right direction. And I think this is what we need to do in the future. Look at the problem, bring people together and solve the problem, have relevance, and build the reach.
Thank you.
Sorry, Khalid, if I may
Please,
add,
go ahead.
I think the cooperation, very interesting, Frederic, but I think one part we shouldn't forget is, and I agree, you need a lot of money to reach a consumer as a startup and as a fintech company. But what you would have seen is those fintech are being smart enough now to start approaching telcos. So if you look at telcos as an industry, they are becoming extremely savvy into the fintech industry and trying to figure out, well, I have the reach like banks do, but if banks are not going to do anything about it, then I will. And I have the reach, I've got their phones, they can actually put anything on their bills. It is actually quite an incredible distribution channel for any fintech. And you would see even between Etisalat, Batelco in Bahrain and STC in Saudi, they are all really, they even have now an investment arm to focus on fintech and how do they bring insurance and banking into their own customer base.
Absolutely, absolutely. Everybody who's having a reach can play a very significant role in this new ecosystem. Absolutely.
Yeah, great insight. Thank you, Ambareen. And that touches upon, it seems to me that the bankers agree that the cost of cash for the merchant is quite high, and it's unknown and ununderstandable by the merchant. So Fab has, Ramana Fab has recently launched a payment platform, and what does that mean to the market, and how will that change the payment ecosystem?
Sure. I think it's super relevant points Frederic and Ambareen made. One is reach, but the point is the right reach, right? There may be hundreds of people who have reach, but how efficiently are they using it? And that's where we come in. I mean, we went to the drawing board and we said, what does this efficient reach mean? And that's all about how you use this data and how you efficiently use this data. So payment companies, I mean, it's a great example if you look at countries like some in Europe and India is a great example. When people started looking at card acceptance and card payments, most of the banks said, oh, it's a cost-consuming exercise to put in this infrastructure, to put this. Let me give it to some of the payment companies or startup entities or so on. Now they see that they're missing the front-end part of combination of a merchant and a consumer. Then they go, oh, I'm missing the greatest part of it, which is the collection of data, which is the front end, right? So what we did is we went back to the drawing board and we said we call something payment as a platform. So there are two types of this payment as a platform. One is today, every service in the acquiring industry had to be hard integrated with the merchant. So let's say we launch Telr, who is one of our PSP, we need to go separately integrate with Telr. We need to go separately integrate with XYZ. We need to go separately integrate with Alipay. We need to go separately integrate. And then every time you separately integrate, you need to go separately enable it also for different merchants in a different way. So what we did is we went back to the drawing board. We have invested and created something called payment as a platform. This has multiple layers. There's a data layer which sits on top of all of these in different applications, number one. Number two, we have consolidated and built in an efficient routing system. So the merchant doesn't decide, we decide which is the right way for a merchant to reduce their cost and for us to bring in efficiency in our transactions. And three, the same platform becomes a sandbox where a fintech can come in, integrate with that sandbox, test it, and by default, it gets available to 50,000-60,000 merchant locations we have today. So one of the best example is what we went live with Buy Now Pay Later. We were the first regional in-store Buy Now Pay Later launch in the region. And in-store, I'm not talking about e-commerce. In-store, which because it was so easy, and for us the turnaround time was few weeks, because we now have a layer where fintech can come in and connect with us, test, and they don't need to worry about reach because we already have the reach.
That's fabulous. Great, fantastic, and I look forward, to learning more about it. Hoping that it provides all the flexibility that the fintech can provide as well. Not being hindered on the back end. And I'm sure from what you're saying, it sounds like quite robust and flexible.
Absolutely.
Kartik, Mashreq is a very well-known fintech supporter, a digital pioneer, very fintech friendly. So can you shed some light on some of the fintech and bank collaborations in the payment space in the UAE?
There are many. I'd like to just start by our collaboration that we have with Niam, and that's powering a large part of our instant remittance platform that we have. If you haven't tested it, you should, because it's. I was blown away at how quickly I was able to transfer money from my Mashreq account to my account in Singapore, which was about 3 seconds. So that's something you generally don't expect in a remittance scenario. But outside of that, we work quite extensively, as you said, with fintechs, like a lot of the others here as well. So there's a lot of PSPs that we are working with, your company included. We are right now looking at a number of functions in the credit analytics space, authentication and security space where we're doing it. And on the merchant side, yeah, like Fab has their platform, we're also about to launch our pay later capability on our platform. So all of these are powered by different fintechs, and that's something that I don't see coming down. I think it's going to continue further and faster.
Thank you, Kartik. Now let's spice it up a little bit before we move into the some questions and answers from the. So today, what I've seen as a survey, that the branch network of the banks are only 35%. They have only 35% in penetration, while the smartphone has, and Frederic touched upon this, has an 80% penetration in the market. So as bankers and industry leaders, what do you think about this fact? Maybe we'll start with Ramana.
It's a fight I have within the bank every day, right? So my objective of my business is I shouldn't touch the branch. So branch shouldn't charge me any money as a allocated cost, because I shouldn't use any branch service. Number two, I shouldn't use any contact center service. When was the last time you called Apple Contact Center or Netflix Contact Center? The other day, my Netflix services went down. I tried my best to find out a number I should call them. And they said, no, you should only do online chat. That's the only way you can access us. So it's pretty interesting how the world is shaping up. And to be honest, we internally, I think we are very committed to that. Our branches, I mean, for the country, and being the largest bank and one way holding the sort of government or / national status as well, we may need to support some of these initiatives. But having said that, the commitment is very, very clear. We want to go digital, and some of these branches, you call it quote unquote, can also be digital branches, right? So they're all digital services. So we would love to do some of those, though I still don't believe we should waste cost on real estate for servicing a customer. It absolutely makes no sense in my personal opinion.
Okay, thank you.
Jump in here, because that's a
Sure.
discussion and debate that has already been put to rest at Mashreq, and that's our strategy for the last 3 years. If you look at the number of branches that we have, is a lot fewer than what we started out 3 years ago. And like you said, a lot of branches are already digital branches, and I can share with you that 90% of our customers are already on our mobile channels already.
Okay.
And I couldn't agree more on real estate. I think real estate is now only on the home screen. Whether your app is there on the home screen or not is the real estate to fight for, not physical.
Agreed. Fantastic. Ambareen, being in the in the marketplace space successfully for so many years now, what can you share with us as best case use, or some of them, that you have seen excellence in digital payments and in the ecosystem?
Before I get to that, I do want to share a little story of my own experience, and that was probably around 2 to 3 years ago. One of the major banks in the UAE tried to go digital, so they invested a whole lot of money on this virtual admin assistant. When you call them, you talk to it and it talks to you back. It was all about AI, and I cannot tell you how frustrated I was, to the point I had to complain all the way to the top, because the woman on the phone, who was a machine, could not actually understand what I was trying to say. And funnily enough, the amount of money they put into this, it actually, and I spoke to someone at this particular bank, they were so ashamed to talk about it. And they said, our customer service went from okay to worse, and the investment in technology just went rocket high. And I think what I'm trying to say is, we all want to go digital, we want to increase digital payment, we want to shut down the branches, but we have to do it right. Just putting money behind it doesn't mean it's going to come out right. You could have probably spent half of it, but understood that lady, if she doesn't understand the customer, then please pass them on to a customer service, versus shutting it down. So if she couldn't understand me, the phone would just shut down. So I could never speak to the bank, which then forced me to go to the branch. There was another bank who recently went digital, or recently, a couple of years ago, went to online banking. And then they sent me a message saying, can you please come to the branch to pick up your online password? And that blew my mind away. Okay, so you're trying to bridge, but I still have to physically go to a bank to actually pick the password up to be able to go back to my computer and use it. So I think, you know, what I have to say about all of this is it's fantastic how a lot of the traditional banks and all are trying to move towards less branches. And there are, I mean, I haven't seen in the UAE a best case scenario, but I have seen it abroad. I mean, there are purely digital bank who are taking over the world in Europe and in US. Either it's purely digital credit card, but again, the key to success to this is your customer experience and the seamless connectivity between all your legacy systems and all your channels. When they talk about omni-channel, it is really omni-channel. It's not because I've gone to the mobile app, it doesn't get reflected on the phone or that. So I think fantastic idea, great investment from the industry, but I think there has to be a lot more improvement on the customer experience side of things.
I couldn't agree more. And I think the user experience and the customer experience is now the gold mine. And I think that brings me back to Dr. Tamer, you know, wearing your eWallet hat with the Salat eWallet. What are your thoughts on interoperability? Because today, if we're going to use the wallet, what's going on? So tell us.
Well, first, I fully agree with Ambareen. I think before getting to interoperability, there are two main things that will require to go digital. Number one is the end-to-end design of the service has to be taken digital in consideration. So any cracks into the process of how you design the product end-to-end digitally affects the customer experience and definitely affects the adoption. So this is number one. Number two is having the right partners in the ecosystem is key. So each and every one is good at what he does. So it's very important to collaborate and to work together in order to have the strength of the partnership of fintech with banking, with telco, in order to also counter attack what's coming from the other non-fintech companies. So we have seen Facebook with his plans. We have seen WhatsApp coming with the payment within. We have seen Apple having their Apple Pay and now having their Apple Card. So these are things that are very important to take care of. In addition to interoperability is key because it is supposed to cater for everyone. It's not in two silos. So if you design a product that only works in a closed loop and it's not able to communicate with the rest of the world, whether on payments, whether on interoperability, it becomes a very limited product.
Thank you very much. And, you know, this is a fabulous topic that we can talk for hours. Unfortunately, we're very bound in time and very tight. So what I'd like to do is just open up for Q&A. We have so many questions from the audience, and I'd like to just, you know, go through a few. Rahma asked, besides trust in paying online for their purchases, what other factors are responsible for the hesitancy that shoppers have in paying digitally? Frederic, would you like to answer that?
Yeah, well, I think the main story is of course is trust, and also trust is moving with that digital revolution, right? I agree to for instance a big part of what is said about branches or about how offline is should be taken over by digital, but still, why are we talking about branches today? Is, for instance, because of people trust something which is tangible, and everybody's going through that same process. And people are older generations takes longer, people younger generations go much faster in that. So that trust factor is something that we need to invest in. And I think that human interface is very important there. If a Netflix chooses like, okay, you cannot talk to us, you can only mail us or use a chatbot, I mean, with a lot of customers, that brings frustration, right? Because you have a problem, you want your problem to be solved, and you don't want to go into a digital interaction from a messaging point of view. So trust is something which is, I think, key to work on and take as a concept within our digital construction.
Thank you, Frederic. And, you know, I'll take one more question from the audience because we're very tight on time. Yaman Fakhruddin asked, how do we resolve the tension between UAE banks and their card partners, still holding for high fees on digital payments / cards, and ask from customers, merchants for lower rates, better service, and innovative, cheaper solutions? Kartik, you want to take that?
I think the rate debate is something that goes on in every market, regardless of what price there is, right? I think the real question to ask is the value being provided, is it commensurate to the price which is charged? In my view, I think there is mispricing across the market in UAE compared to what is being provided. And, there will be always three sides to this debate. But I would just submit to say that with more payment methods coming in, I think it's going to be better for consumers because there will be more choice. I expect that rates will overall go down because of competition. Weaker hands may withdraw at some point of time, and ultimately players with scale will survive.
Fantastic. Thank you so much. Yeah.
For merchants and customers.
Yeah, and we've heard.
Sorry, Khalil.
Sure, go ahead, please, Ramana.
I just want to add one point to this. I think price is, again, everything has a price. Now, what are you calculating this price against, right? That's the most important thing, people. I mean, there are some countries which have made it zero. And now I know, and most of us know, the payment participants within these countries are now going back and saying, why should I invest so much technology? Why should I put so much capital in when I don't see the uplift or uptake in terms of revenue? So always we have to remember that today the cost of doing something is X. And then when we talk about replacing that X, you need to pay some cost. Cost of replacing cash cannot be cheap or zero, right?
Absolutely, agreed. And I think we've all heard that the Central Bank of UAE is considering lowering the domestic interchange on debit cards to help in this solution. Thank you very much, distinguished panelists, Ambareen, Kartik, Ramana, Dr. Tamer, Frederic. Thank you so much for your time. We appreciate it. This is a debate that can go on and on and on. And unfortunately, we are out of time. I appreciate your insights, and I look forward to seeing you later on throughout the day. Thank you.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you so much for the amazing and informative session that we had. And thank you to all the attendees. I would request all the attendees to please join in the next panel discussion that we have. It's about enterprise payments, delivering an effective strategy. So to all the attendees, requesting you all to please start. You can join in the next session. On the right-hand side of your screen, there is a join in session button. Please click on that. And thank you to all the panel. Thank you so much of taking out time and coming in, speaking on this topic. Thank you. Take care. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye. Take care. Stay safe.